everybody. I hope you had a good lunch and that you are not at all too sleepy to stay awake during this presentation. And I'm sure you've heard this many times already, but welcome to GCAP. It's very exciting. My name is Cassandra, and this is my inaugural attendance to GCAP and my very first time in Australia. So I'm very excited to meet all of you and be here with all of you and to share some of what I know in the event that it helps you with what you're working on. So let's go ahead and get started here. You are in the right room if you are attending Reaching Beyond the Indie Bubble. If you're in the wrong room, I would encourage you to stay anyway. We're going to have fun together, and I can't guarantee that you will at whatever other room you are going to. So before we get started, I did want to take the opportunity just to introduce myself. So I've been in the gaming industry now for almost 10 years, which feels incredible to say, a little bit scary to say, but my history has been primarily under the marketing umbrella, and I like to call it holistic when in fact I've just been all over the place under that umbrella. I've done influencer management of various kinds. I've been on the agency side, the studio side, the publisher side, the developer side. And now I'm working exclusively in social media for Blizzard Entertainment on their upcoming game Warcraft Rumble, which, always be plugging, is available in soft launch here in Australia. And I highly recommend you pick it up because although I personally am not a live ops player most of the time, I play this game every day, and it's not just because I work on it. So you've got some time in between talks. You could check it out for sure. Before I started working at Blizzard, I worked exclusively with indie titles. And within that work with indie titles, I used to work almost exclusively with pre-launch titles. So I would help with audience development. I would help with planning out marketing and general business strategies for generating visibility, discoverability online. And it is with that I was actually able to transition professionally into, something that I had a passion for prior to coming into the gaming industry, which was focusing on small projects, helping promote and work with small projects, which is something that I did as a live streamer and also as a co-owner for a meetup group in my area. It's just something that I get a lot of fulfillment out of and made me extremely fulfilled to be doing professionally. For myself as a gamer, my favorite game series is The Legend of Zelda, and my favorite game ever is Majora's Mask. I'm sorry to anyone whose favorite Zelda game is different. You are wrong. But we're allowed to disagree. And I do think that some of the things that I discovered as a child with Majora's Mask carry over into my professional life. The idea that there's no real such thing as an NPC in Majora's Mask, where you know everybody's history, you experience their struggles. Sometimes you walk in on their marital disputes, but everybody in a game has value. And I think that there's something really special about that, and something that we're seeing more of, even on like the spicy side with Baldur's Gate, in more contemporary games. And then just like on the personal side, I love live events. I love getting dressed up for the ballet and the theater. I love live music. And just as a small aside, that bottom photo there's actually a theme park by where I live called Enchanted Forest. And there's no event that would ever take you to that part of the United States, but it's whimsical and creepy, and it's been around for like 60 years, but they have a log ride there. So like half roller coaster, half water slide. And it's the only part of my life that I will actively apply the laws of physics and make sure that our log is heavy enough to become completely drenched. So in work as in life, pursue everything with passionate abandon. Now we're going to transition into like stuff that you came here to see. Okay, so the takeaways for today. There always must be takeaways, and these are the ones that I'd like you to have for today. First of all, be able to define the indie bubble. What is that? I would like to say that I coined it, but it's not official. But I'd like you to be able to define it and take this back to your teams, back to your work. And I just want to clarify that it's not a bad thing. that we operate at least partially inside the indie bubble. It's a beautiful place. However, when it comes to marketing, when it comes to reaching potential fans, potential players, it's not the ideal place to be. So that leads me to the second takeaway. We need strategies for breaking out of the indie bubble, for going beyond it and reaching those fans, those potential players, not just our colleagues. We'll do that through our choice of content platforms, the types of content that we put out into the world, and making sure that we're conscientious of who our target audience is. If you are working on a game, and right now in this room you could not tell your neighbor who your target audience is, I really want you to think about that and apply what we talk about today to what your answer ultimately ends up being. And finally, it's going to be a lot of development here, I would like you to develop a foundational understanding of the audience development pathways available to you. So as somebody who works primarily in a pre-launch setting within games, developing your audience is really important. And earlier this week at GDC in California, I actually gave a talk about defining your audience early rather than later on in development process, because it informs all of the marketing that you're going to be doing up to and through your launch period. So this includes creating advocates, finding where your audience lives, and then meeting them there with content that they would enjoy. So jumping right in, I'm just going to read this because this was like the best version of this definition I could come up with. The indie bubble is a social and professional network of indie games developers that all have a game to make and promote. So little time to play, test, share, or promote each other's work. So everybody in this room is likely working on a game or a product for a game in some capacity. And there is a saying that I think is very accurate, that the more you work in games, the less time you have to play games. And I think this is even more true for games that are in development, where you have to be giving critical, actionable feedback to versions of games that don't even qualify as a demo to help your colleagues further their development. There's only so much time in a day, and there's only so much mental capacity we all have to be in that developer mindset all of the time. And unfortunately, the reality is we can be a really big fan of a lot of games and have a lot of projects being made by our friends. But that doesn't mean that we have the time and the availability to be true advocates in a consumer space for all of those projects. That is one of the limiters of being only in the indie bubble. You want to make sure that you're finding people who do have that time and availability. So, what actions are we taking that limit us to the indie bubble? You can read them here. You've probably already read them, but I'm going to read them to you anyway. We have overly technical content, B2B tagging and promoting, inactivity, and using your personal page or personal pages as your business pages. And we're going to dive into all of these momentarily, but here is a really high-level view. If you were going to take a picture of any of these slides, I would recommend it be this one. Because this is the high-level view of what we'll be discussing for the rest of this talk. If you have overly technical content, what is the briefest way that I can tell you to break out of that, to go beyond it? It would be to post instead accessible progression of your product using striking visuals. And I don't mean striking visuals like Disney level, like full 3D, all of the shading, all of the lighting, and all the other artist words that I don't know, but things that are interesting to the target audience that you've identified. If you're doing a lot of B2B in what is frankly a B2C world, you are kind of focusing on a product promotion, and we'd like to get you to a project promotion. So what that essentially means is, are you a walking billboard for the tools that you use for your project, or are you a walking billboard for your project? For inactivity, I wouldn't even need to show this up here. I think everybody knows that the short answer to fixing inactivity is to be active. So more content on more platforms is the high-level solution here. And finally, your personal page as a business page. This is not going to create project fans outside of the indie bubble. It's going to create network members. And again, there's nothing wrong with the indie bubble. There's nothing wrong with building your network, with building your portfolio, with showing potential colleagues, potential managers, and hiring managers what you can do. But if you're looking to sell your game in a capitalistic market, you need to be focusing on fans. Now let's go a little deeper here. If you have technical content, what does that mean? Generally speaking, it's project details that are designed to be understood or, generally designed for other developers, not players. Things that the average player would look at and go, I don't know what that means. What's the significance? Am I impressed? Am I disgusted? Like, what's the issue here and what's the point? Some aspects of this could be the specific mechanics of the engine that you're using. It could be programming language or like little jokes or different methodologies that you use for your programming. And it could be something like the polygons conversation. Just sitting out in the hall earlier today, I saw a developer post a photo of Spyro from an early Game Boy version of the game. And it was a really cool post that talked about how impressive it was that the developers for this game made the texturing with the number of polygons that they had for the Spyro model and how it looked exactly like the key art, and it was incredible. Although I agree, the average player would look at the text for that post and go, well, what are you talking about? So, I think that type of post can be great if you're talking to other developers who know what you're saying. But if you include that type of post in your publishing for consumers, they're not going to be with you when they're thinking about how impressive it is. Some examples of this from recent games would be Unpacking, in case anybody here isn't familiar. An absolutely glorious little indie game about moving through life and the different phases you're in when you relocate. The players, this was excellent. It got Worst Boyfriend of the Year award, which was excellent. But the thing that developers locked onto and that got technical awards was the audio design, because of how many different surfaces they used and how the different items sounded different when you put them on different surfaces. That's not necessarily something that a player is going to experience and go, oh my gosh, this took hundreds of hours to do. What an incredible feat. They did it. It's so amazing. That's something that we think is amazing and incredible. So these are things to think about when we are talking to our consumers. But what's the alternative then? Well, we have movement sequences. Everybody loves a good walking animation, right? Especially when it's over time. Did your first walking animation have 3 frames and now it's got 12 and it looks really smooth and really cool? You can share that and the players can understand the visual progression without you going into the technical details about how you did it, why you did it, what engine it's in, these types of things. Tile sets are really fun because I think you look at a tile set and the way it's laid out, if you're buying one or you're organizing one, and you're like, look at this visual gobbledygook, what is this? And suddenly it makes a beautiful scene. And you have a lot of retro games that very clearly use a tile set. But if you have a video or some sort of time lapse of building a background with tile sets, I think it's absolutely fascinating to look at. And it's literally the building blocks of your background. And those types of things can be very interesting for players. A scene storyboard. This could be something like there's a room with different things in it. I'll just pull from Zelda if you don't mind. Again, you walk into a room and there's a chest over on the side. Do you expect the player to go in, kind of spin around a little bit and leave? Or do you think that they'll come in and go, look at this cute room. There's an action I can do. I'm going to go do that. Now, multiply that by a number of actions and discuss or show how you think the player would engage in a room. And I think a great example of this is, and if you know already, I Want to Be the Boshi. This is a game that became incredibly famous now a while ago, but the developer and the level designer were just really, really good, either through testing or intuition or a combination of the two, at guessing where a player's problem-solving decisions would take them. So they enter into a level, and it looks fine. A little platform in the middle, there's flooring on the other side. Hop on the platform, hop on the other side, and you're golden, right? Except all of the traps are invisible. You hop onto the platform and a hammer comes out of the sky and you die. And you say, okay, I'm not gonna jump right there, or I'll jump there and then I'll move. They knew where you were going to move to, and as soon as you landed again, something else comes down and kills you, to the point where you have to memorize the whole level in order to not fall to your death or be crushed, or a number of other traps that they would lay there for you. So this is an extreme example of storyboarding, but I think it goes to show how you can develop almost a parasocial relationship with players by engaging in problem solving with them and anticipating their actions. Level design. Character drawings. We all love a good character drawing, and you don't even have to be a quote-unquote good artist to do excellent character drawings. We like to see what players look like. We like to be able to think about them and visualize them and imagine them in these different settings. And it just doesn't have to be this, really top tier, super fancy type of artwork, whatever that means to you specifically. We have many star games in the industry whose sole developers were not artists. They were programmers, or they were level designers, or they were games writers, and they made their game anyway, and their art style is iconic, and it's beautiful, or it's really cute. Just some quick examples for that. Undertale, as I'm sure folks here are aware of, A Short Hike, and even Stardew Valley, where you can now make yourself a Stardew Valley character on TikTok. These things carry forward, and as long as it's visually striking to your target audience, they're gonna love it. And finally, animations. We live online in a world of videos. We want to see what you're working on, and we want to see it move. So any type of animation is probably going to be a good way to go when it comes to reaching your players and bringing down the technical language while still communicating visually with them. Next, we have the B2B blues. This is when you're focused on your B2B wording rather than your B2C promotion. So what does that look like when you're doing it? Part of it is you're writing on individual merit. I'm really good at this, or I know all of these different hacks. Look at this cool thing that I did in this tool or this software. And you're kind of showcasing your own personal skills within the tool. And again, within the indie bubble, this is fine. You are potentially building your portfolio. You're potentially creating a library of posts for a background check or for clients. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you're looking to reach audiences with your project, they want to see more about the project itself, not how great you are at making it. So you can see the second bullet point there is focusing on the tools. Are you online to talk about how great now not Unity is, but you get the idea. Or are you there to talk about, look at this project that I'm doing, isn't it incredible? And there might seem to be a slight difference in language there, but it is powerful. And finally, it can be indecipherable to a majority of players. When you start talking about tools, you start talking about software and the intricacies and the efficacy of those tools in doing whatever it is that you're doing. And I'm just going to annoy you all with examples for all of these slides. But something that I think really stuck with me was there was a conversation after I think Shrek 2 came out that was like, nobody ever comments on good water. Good water is just, they don't even see it. It's when it's not good water that people suddenly go, there's something wrong with this water. And I think that that is true if you apply it to games. If something looks the way that you're intending it to look, then it's either going to look realistic and people are going to go, that's normal, and move on to the next thing, or you're going to do something really innovative with it and they will notice it for a positive reason. So instead of being technical about how you textured the water and how you manufacture the algorithm for the waves and the depth and all of this, it's cool water. look at my water. Like, this is awesome water. And yes, check, you did it. So, some alternatives here. Focus on the fan experience. If a new potential fan is coming to your pages, what are they seeing? And I think a good way to think about this is your game is a new toy coming to market. That's what a game is, right? It's a toy. So if you're trying to sell a toy, if you're trying to excite people about a new toy, do you talk to them about the specific type of synthetic fiber that this teddy bear is made out of, and the pattern of the stitching on the paws, and where they put the eyes, and how they hide all of the threads to make things not stick out if you're going to give this teddy bear to your niece or nephew? No, they don't. They go, this teddy bear is soft. This teddy bear is just the right size. This teddy bear has a cute face, and I like the way that it looks. These are very different conversations, so consider that when you are thinking about addressing your players directly. Next is to lean into the emotional impact of your game. You might think that it's impossible to share the emotions and evoke the emotions of your game prior to launch, but this is not the case. If you design your content in a way that purposefully talks about or talks to that emotion, you can impart to players on your pages that your game is creepy, that your game is exciting, that your game is calming. Whatever it is, you can show that in the types of visual content, musical content, gameplay content that you show that's going to be interesting to your target audience. And we're just going to keep coming back to this idea of who are you making this game for? Because we all know you might be making a game that you want to bring to the world. It's your story, it's your narrative, the one that you wanted to tell since you were a kid and thought about it. That's fine. But you already know how to play your game. You know all the secrets. If we have discoverability inside the game, you've already discovered it all. So when we think about the players who don't know anything, you want to evoke those ideas, whatever they are thematically, with the audience. And again, example, Darkest Dungeon 2, which was in early access for ages, all of their assets that they posted really gave this idea of you're running this carriage through the apocalypse and being attacked by these strange creatures, strange even for people who played the first game. And that made it exciting. This feeling of apprehension, of death could come at any moment and you'd have to start over, was conveyed in those assets and in those posts. And that's something that I would challenge you today to consider and attempt in your own publishing of content. And finally here, the game page is for your fans. Make it for them. It's not for your colleagues. It's not for you even. It's for the people you want to find your game. And I cannot stress enough that the people you want to find your game are not you. As much as we want them to be, even if this is the game that we needed as a kid or as a budding developer, it's for them just as much as it is for you, potentially more so if you're looking to make any money off of it. Next, we have inactivity. You are the needle in the haystack, the prize, the thing that everybody's looking for inside that banal stack of straw. And in order for people to find you, you have to be findable. And the more you're posting, to a degree, the easier it's going to be for people to find you. And posting doesn't just help people find you, it helps you find them. And this is where you're going to find your advocates, your moderators, the fans who have the time, the ability, and the passion for your project to market for you, to share with their friends, to create community, to participate in community. This is where those people can be found. So what's blocking you from sharing more content? This is my theory on that. Perfectionism. I think we all in this room are artists in our own way, whether we work inside the field of art or we work in programming, level design, marketing, what have you. I think we're all artists in our own way because we all work in a creative field. You can't be a perfectionist about this type of stuff, especially when you're in development. We all understand. Players, for the most part, will understand as long as you're communicating clearly the game is in development. This is a whip. It is in process. This is where I am. And heck, this is where I was 6 months ago. Everybody loves a good side-by-side. I think it looks really cool, especially if you're showing something that isn't your normal discipline. So get out of the perfectionism headspace and share that whatever is the best that you currently have. The second aspect of this is a lack of mindfulness. Are you just content dumping? Are you recording for 10 minutes, whatever you can, and then posting that on Twitter, where a 10-minute video isn't going to get you any views? Are you not considering what you're doing in your creative process that would be interesting to people who come across your page? We're going to come back again. Target audience. Who are you making content for? What is the genre of your game? And what about that genre is most exciting for players to engage with? Is it the combat? Is it the cute farm? Is it the outfits? Is it the romanticizing the different, villagers that you have? Whatever it is, show that to the players, because that's what they want to see. If that's their favorite aspect of the type of game that you're making, that's going to make them stick around much more often than just I'm too tired and posting random stuff from your development. And the last one is being shy. We all know how cruel the internet can be, and the possibility for vitriolic, unfair criticism, especially in large amounts, is always there. Dealing with it is something that unfortunately can take practice, whether you've dealt with something like that in person, in your normal life, or online. There will be people who give you a negative review for no reason. There will be people who come for your game for seemingly no reason, or tell you that it's not the kind of game they want, so it's wrong. You don't need to listen to these people. It's not for them. Target audience. And I know that it's difficult, but it is something that you shouldn't internalize, because just like when you're making friends, if your personality is not for some people, that's okay. It's probably by design. You're not talking to them. You're not looking for them. You want to find the people who mesh well with you, who vibe well. And unfortunately, people who have negative opinions and anonymity online are very wont to share them. So my advice to you here, even though I know it's obvious, would be to post anyway. Share anyway. Be sincere and genuine with your project anyway. And if somebody doesn't like that, that's okay. You didn't even want them there anyway. So, expand your island. If we consider you and your game as an island in a churning ocean of content, we need to make yours bigger. You can't just be by yourself. People need to find you. So consider the content as you go. What are you posting, and is it conscientious of your potential audience? Record all of your creative processes if you can. You never know when something interesting is going to come up while you're drawing, while you're iterating. Maybe something absolutely ridiculous happens when the programming breaks and it just goes off the rails. The figure turns upside down or twists itself around, and you have a fun little moment. But now it's just for you, and you can't share it with anybody. It's a missed opportunity, right? So make timestamps for yourself if you need to. Nobody wants to work for 4 hours and then watch themselves work for another 4 hours. But definitely be considerate of your own marketing efforts and make things as easy for yourself as possible. Invest in diverse platforms. This does not mean post on everything all of the time. I work in social media, and that is exhausting. Don't do that. Pick a couple that really seem to vibe with your game. And what I mean by that is, are the visuals exceptionally engaging? Is it an absolutely gorgeous game that you're working on? Maybe video platforms and platforms like Instagram that cater to that would be really good for your game. Is it more of a gameplay-based? Is it more of a puzzle-based thing where you can't give the solution, but you can show some of it and make it exciting another way? There could be other options there. So I would say to you, find a couple platforms that cater to the type of content that you want to make, because it's not just what's best for your game, it's what you'll actually do. If it's a chore, which I think a lot of us think it is, you won't do it, and it's only going to harm your marketing in the long run if you don't do it because it's too much, you're in too many places, or the type of content you're trying to make is something that you don't like making. So think about what platforms you want to be on and then commit to those platforms. Be consistent. It doesn't have to be every day. You've got a lot that you're working on. You're a game developer. So it doesn't need to be every day, but it should be consistent. You want people to come to your page and say, this is an active developer. They're making progress regularly. They're sharing regularly. I can count on this creator to bring me something that I'll play later. On top of that, the algorithms are going to punish you for not posting. So make sure that you are consistent with what you are doing. Finally here, we have mixed messaging. So this is when you're using your personal page as your business page. In other words, you're making a game, but you don't have a page for that game. You're just sort of talking about it on your own page that you like promote yourself on. What this does is it promotes you. It doesn't promote your project. And, you know, although we all want to be the next, like, Chris Columbus, James Cameron, whatever it is, of gaming, I would say that we're probably not there yet, one day, but we want to get people to be fans of our work. Be a fan of the project, not necessarily of us, at least not until later. I don't know about all of you, but, like, I can tell you if I know a song, if it plays. I probably can't tell you the name of it or even who sung it, but I will recognize it. And the same thing I think is true in gaming. People will see maybe the publisher name, they'll see the developer studio icon flash before they play, but they're not going to know you. And I feel like that is probably a good thing. Retain your privacy. Be known for your work within the indie bubble, not outside the indie bubble. So we really want to foster fans of the work, not fans of ourselves in a consumer marketplace. The second thing here is your project becomes a credential. Instead of being a focus where you're trying to actively make it a livelihood or you're trying to sell it and make the last 7 years of your life worth the unemployment, you definitely want to be focusing on the project rather than having it be a portfolio piece. And finally here, we're kind of putting the reputational cart before the horse and saying, I made it, so you should play it, rather than this game is amazing and I happened to make it. So I hope that you will consider that, because although I'm sure we all know people in our networks whose projects we follow because it's them, this is not the case in the vast majority of consumer spaces. If you're ever wondering why gamers, capital G gamers, are so mean and they just don't care how developers are treated, they just want the game, it's because they don't see you. They see the game. And a lot of what goes on behind the scenes, the culture, how you treat yourself is not visible to them. And I'm not sure if you want it to be visible to them necessarily. If you do, go ahead, I guess. But I think there's a lot of power that comes with not having that parasocial personal relationship with gamers as a developer. So what can we do to kind of address this? And I think this is an interesting separation here. So if you're doing all of your marketing in service to yourself, this is going to affect your professional network, probably in a positive way, but you're not going to reach the consumers. You're going to reach potential colleagues. You're going to reach those hiring managers. Which leads into the second point there, your job hunting. Are you looking for a job? Maybe that's what you're doing and these are small projects and you're like, I'm practicing, and that's fine. And finally, that portfolio aspect. If you want something to forever be known as that one thing that so-and-so did, fine, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you are wanting this to be a consumer success, something that will make you money, you have to get out of that mindset and treat it as a consumer product, not as just another thing that you made. Which leads us to the bottom half of this slide, which is for your game. Calls to action, things that tell people where to find you, what you're working on, and how they can get involved, if you're making space for that, if that's something that you want. If you have a Patreon or a Discord or anything to that effect, Kickstarters, like what have you for marketing, for fundraising, get those people involved. That's where your advocates are, right? Is in the consumer space. Work on your branding. We all have our individual voices, but our products have a different voice. Our products have their own voice that has to be developed. And we see this in brands that we know. I don't know if you have Wendy's here, but if you don't, you should look them up on Twitter if you never have seen them, because they roast the ever-living crap out of all their competitors, and you would never expect a small girl logo who looks like Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz to be absolutely dunking on the competitors in the fast food burger world. But she does, and it's absolutely fantastic. And that's what I mean when I say your product has a voice. It has something that it sounds like, and it has something that your fans are going to expect from it. If Wendy's just randomly started being nice, we would all be suspicious. Like, why did you change your social media manager here? If you use Duolingo, their TikTok is unhinged, and I mean that very sincerely. Like, I watched a video of theirs a couple days ago, and it was the duo bird and the purple-haired teenager twerking on the floor to a trending song. And I'm like, I wish I could be so unsupervised. But it's a tone. They do that sort of stuff all the time. And your product has a voice too. Your project has a voice. Just figure out what it is and stick to that, rather than having it just be you behind the screen of your game. So, back to our takeaways here. I would hope now that you can define the indie bubble and view it as not a negative space, but a professional space for networking, for colleagues. This conference is part of that bubble, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with being here. It's a great place to be. But you're not going to find your consumers here, are you? You're going to find more developers to add to your professional network, to be friends with, to find projects that you are now aware of. So, to phrase it another way from the beginning, the indie bubble is a supportive community of developers that want the best for each other, but they're unable to lean into your project as an advocate the way that fans can. And that's really the crux of the issue here. Relationships with all of you would be amazing, and it would be my privilege to know all of you and know about your projects and be able to track them over time and celebrate with you when they launch. But the fact of the matter is that I work on my own project, and I don't have the time to play the games on my own backlog that's unfortunately 300 deep, let alone be an active demo player and early reviewer for the entirety of my professional network. Next, we have strategies for breaking out, going beyond the indie bubble. I think some of these would probably be pretty obvious to you, but hopefully there's a little more context. And if these are things that you're like, yeah, I roll my eyes, I know. Hopefully you have more context now to decipher the why and take some action. So be on multiple platforms for your project that are suited to your project, and that content for those platforms isn't going to burn you out or make you just hate doing social media. Post a variety of content. And again, we're going for that average player. We're going for discoverability. It's a target audience, but you don't want to be overly specific when it comes to your reach. So give everybody the opportunity to be a fan of your project. But when it comes to the ideal player, in this next bullet point here, that's who you're ultimately tailoring the content for, is them. It's most exciting for them while still being widely visible. And finally, the foundational aspects of audience development. You know that you have an audience. You're a part of many audiences. And it's always exciting to find a new product, even if it's Facebook spying on you and giving you an ad for something based on your search history. Sometimes it works out. If you're like, I want to buy candy, and then suddenly all of your social media pages are like, would you like to buy some candy? It's fun to have new products come across your feed, to find new things to be excited about. And your fans are going to feel that way too. They're going to be excited to find you, but they need help in doing so. You need to be active. You need to be posting engaging content that truly speaks to your game or is from your game and speaks to that tone that is relatable to the game. Which leads us to this last point here. Be relatable and anticipate the interests of your target audience. In some cases, this might result in a parasocial thing going on. You're fully free to turn off your DMs. But the real point here is that as you're building the game, you know what's coming down the line. You know how the story is going to work out. You know what the mechanics are generally supposed to be. And you know what you want your players to feel. And you can communicate this through a drip feed, whatever it is, to your potential players to keep them along. Come with me on this journey as I'm making the game, and then I gift it to you as an experience. There's something really special about that, I think, whether you're a developer with a new game or a player with a new game, is that fruition of following an active project. And you can be that for your fans. You can develop that relationship and that trust. And then you can be the famous game maker that you want to be with those people. Get my mouse here. Okay. We're going to have some time for Q&A, but thank you so much for attending my talk today. This is just some info if you would like to find me later. I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter, Blue Sky, and if you cared to know my very periodic thoughts on indie projects, I have a site called Indie Horde, just indiehorde.com, and I talk exclusively about the indie games that I play there when I have the time to do so. But that is the end of the talk. If there are questions, I would love to hear them. Also, feel free to approach me after this. I'm actually really shy at these things, even though I do the public speaking. It's very unlikely that I'm going to approach any of you individually. But I love chatting, otherwise I wouldn't be up here. So I mean it when I say I would love to know about all of your projects, and I would love to meet all of you. This is my first time in Australia, and I think I would be really sad to go home and say I didn't meet anybody from Australia while I'm here. So thank you all again, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Yeah.
Just in the sense of posting to social regularly and committing and trying not to get burnt out by it, do you have any suggestions as to those sort of automators that let you post in advance and schedule and post to multiple channels? Is there anything you recommend there?
Yeah, so those can actually be really powerful tools and can streamline the process and make it so you're spending less time overall. The main thing that I would just caution you about is using the exact same copy in all of those posts across the board, especially when you're talking about hashtags or even tagging other pages. That's not going to work across platforms. So just be cautious of when you're doing that. Some of them will allow you to customize for each platform, but even if it's a slight verbiage change, I would recommend understanding best practices of the platforms. And just a couple examples of that, like Instagram, you can't link to anything in the feed. Instagram, you can have 30 hashtags. Don't do that on Twitter or Facebook, you know what I mean? So I would say absolutely yes, use them if it's going to be helpful and get you to actually do it.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Do you have any tips for being able to find platforms where people are interested in hearing about indie games, for instance, that are in early development, but are still focused on the players?
Sure. So I'm not sure that there is like a best way to find emerging platforms, but there are a lot of places that are either forum-based or they have a lot of room to talk about that sort of stuff. Things like Discord, Reddit, any place that players can make their own area to talk you're probably going to find places there. I would just caution you about jumping right in. A lot of those community-run places are very good at identifying an ad, even if it's an informal ad. So you'll want to make sure that you're working with the moderators of the space, and that it's okay to post the kind of content that you do. Throughout my time as a marketer, I have gotten in trouble a couple times with community moderators who are like, that's too salesy. We're not here to go off and buy a game. It needs to be community oriented. And I think this group of people will probably have less of that when it's actively in development and you're trying to share progress with it. But I would definitely think in your mind, like, where are people developing their own niches within the platform? Even Facebook does that. So think about that. I'm not sure how much luck you'll have with emerging platforms, since they tend to kind of fall off, as we've seen with the would-be Twitter replacers since Musk. We'll go over on this side. Yes?
So I run a visual effects company that specialises in film production, and we're just developing our own game at the moment. So if I showed work that we were doing in films, and I'd be locked up, and you'd have to show me. So I'm getting my head around what things do you not show in games, or how does it all work?
Yeah, I think that there's a really good way that you could show that to build trust, in that you could have a trailer of, like, from the makers of insert film stuff, or the studio behind insert film stuff brings you this new title. You can definitely leverage that if you have great stuff that's already happening, or that's already happened.
I mean more in terms of within the game.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a big boss at the end, or whatever.
Sure.
Do you show that in your marketing, or do you leave that to the gamer to discover as they're playing the game once it's released?
I mean, that is unfortunately, I think, a personal choice on, do you want the boss to be a big surprise, or do you want the player to go, I want to fight that, and work towards it. They're both valid strategies. It's just a matter of what you want to show, how much you want to show, and if it's okay, you think, to spoil the final boss for folks, which there's no wrong answer, I don't think. It's just a matter of how does that work into your overall strategy. Yeah.
Have you ever found there to be a tension between your marketing and your developers in terms of the target audience? And
Yes.
So who they think their audience is and who you think it should be, or who, chicken and the egg one?
Yes, I do. I think that is something that permeates the entire gaming industry. If you're working at a studio, I would consider the entirety of the folks who work at a studio to be game developers, not just programmers, not just engineers, not just artists. And I'm not saying that folks in those disciplines disagree with me, but I am saying that there's a different relationship when you are in the building blocks and you are character designing than there is when you're looking at something as a consumer product. And when you are that close to the game, it's very easy, and I think normal, to be possessive of who it's for and have more of this idea of I made it for me, which can be detrimental to marketing. And like I said, I think that is just throughout the entire industry. It's a conversation that has to happen between the publishing side and the developing side of the studio. A hard conversation, I think, because the developers want the game to sell and they want it to do well. And sometimes their idea of what that means can differ from the realities of the marketplace. So if that's something that you find yourself struggling with, and you have the authority within the studio to bring that conversation together, do. If you don't, then it might be on an individual basis, or depending on how the executives of the studio balance priority, it might have to be something that if you're on the publishing side, you go, well, this is what you wanted, so here you go, and it is what it is. Yes?
Do you have any tips for getting initial traction, so getting to your first 1,000 followers?
Sure. I think being active is the biggest thing. You can strategically choose hashtags or get involved in threads, which can be great for visibility, but that is probably a developer-focused strategy, you can do ads if you want, but I think to this gentleman's point about community spaces, if you have your target audience identified and you go to where they are and you respectfully engage with them, that's probably going to be one of the strongest organic strategies that you can do, which might be a little difficult if you don't have your target audience picked out, but if you do, and you go to where they are, you're going to have a much higher conversion rate to liking your page or engaging with your content. Awesome. Well, thanks, everybody. I hope you have a great rest of your conference.